Hi, everybody. Welcome to our last leadership book of the month of 2025. Hey, Brett.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, good. I'm excited to dive in to talk with you about this one. We both liked it. That's all I know. We didn't do a pregame. So this will be a good one. So welcome aboard, everybody. We're just going to, I'll do a quick introduction of the book, and then Brett and I will share and talk together about our favorite points that apply to leadership today. So this book, it came out in 2019, and why we selected it for this this last one of the year is the message covers so much about leadership philosophy and leadership practices. The author has also has an academic background and does a lot of research, but he has a lot of practical experience as well. So that is why it was picked, and it also covers things that I would say kind of a leadership philosophy that is really important for leaders to consider now when there's so much confusion and complexity and change happening all the time. This is a philosophy I think that can help people get their head around it. Any thoughts from you on why it's a good one to read?
Yeah, I love the mindset, and I think there's a lot of leaders that would benefit from a potential shift. I mean, it's that pause where it just causes you to reflect and ask, hey, how am I managing my company or my business or even my family, myself? And whether or not somebody can actually make the shift. And he even makes a comment in the book a couple of different times where people tend to drift between mindsets, a finite versus an infinite mindset. But yeah, this is one of those that you can certainly pull out periodically and kind of just do a reset.
Yeah, right on. And I think that's a good action to have intentionally if you're trying to have an infinite mindset. So that's what the book is, the infinite game. And that he talks in here the comparison between a finite game and an infinite game. So a finite game, he uses the example of football where there is a timer. The players are known, they're known ahead of time. There's certain rules that everybody knows going in. And then the game ends. So there's got a start time and an end time. And then an infinite game, like in business that he's talking the most about, the rules can change, the players change. There's no finish line. So even that we're here at year end, that's another good reason to read this, because the pressure at year end, quarter end, and the pressures that we have all the time, but those are short term, not infinite. So the general idea is that business goes on and on even after we're gone. So the company would still go on. So how do we lead in a game that never ends? And he describes it as the infinite mindset will inspire stronger teams, build trust, and encourage innovation, and create the organization that's built to last. So as I mentioned, we'll take turns to sharing some of our favorite points or points we struggled with or things that got our attention. And so Brett, I'll invite you to share first.
Yeah. Do you want to do intros or no?
Oh, do you have something you want to do?
Well, I wanted to apologize to our listeners. I missed last month. I got a bug the week we were supposed to do our convo, and I powered through the book, which was leading through. And I know Kelly went solo on that one, but I had to apologize for everybody. There was just no way that you would have wanted me to be on that conversation in the kind of condition I was. So that was what it was, so to speak. I'm Brett. Kelly introduced me a little bit. 35 years in the industry, all of it focused on supply chain and food service. Sales leadership roles at some Fortune 500 manufacturers, and recently doing M&A work. And when I think about that and why I say that, I always look at what does it matter and why would somebody want to invest their time in Kelly and Brett, which is really what you're doing, right? You're spending 30 to 45 minutes with us. And our why statement, which Kelly and I coined a long time ago, was to inspire the leaders of tomorrow to invest in themselves today. So our stories and path, Kelly's and I's, are a little bit different, but not that much. And I'm confident that at least a few of our listeners are probably in a similar position that we were maybe 30 years ago. Tons of energy, a lot of ambition, tremendous enthusiasm, and just simply didn't know where to start or just needing that first break. We're kind of all there if you want to think about it that way. So my point is you're in the right place, friends. And although there's no silver bullets, there's no magic, following a playbook similar to ours, kind of tilts the odds greatly in your favor, which is, investing in yourself. You'll hear me talk a lot, not so much today, about networking and then continuous education, which is really what we're advocating for by reading some of these books. But I always say my daughters kind of caution me from going what I call old dad mode. That's kind of where we go. So I'll just share a real quick story for you. We just recently went on a trip to Hawaii, and I had a book picked out for the flight to Hawaii, and I had a book picked out for the flight back. And I read the book on the way out. That was great. And I was kind of still in that reading mode. So I grabbed the book that I had scheduled to read on the way home, and I read that in the first 2 days we were in Hawaii. So now I didn't have a book for the flight back, and I had my Kindle. So I went on there and I bought another book. So and I read that entirely on the way back. So in the course of 3 weeks, in the course of 1 week, I read 3 books. So I got to confess, they were all John Grisham books, which is one of my favorite nonfiction authors. So, or fictional authors rather. They weren't this leadership or personal development, all that. But my whole point is walking the talk and the value of reading, both for recreation and relaxation, as well as for personal development. So, Kelly.
Yeah. Well, let me chime in on, we talk a lot about the leaders on their way up and how we focus on them, and they'll benefit from our conversations. And I also believe that leaders who are very experienced will benefit from our conversations and the books we recommend, because they can get stuck. They can get stuck in, that's the way I've always done it. And sometimes I use hashtag no dinosaurs. So if you don't want to be a dinosaur, you want to stay relevant, you have to invest in your continued development, because the skills that are necessary evolve all the time. So
say that one more time. I want to use that one. Would you say the past had no dinosaurs?
Hashtag.
Oh, hashtag no dinosaurs. Got it.
Dinosaurs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think that's important for our listeners too. So it's not only for those on their way up, but the ones who have been successful already and reached a certain level of success maybe think that they know it all. Anybody listening to us isn't going to think that, but we want to encourage them to continue developing.
So the book is The Infinite Game. That's the name of the game. And I started to think about teeing that up for the listener. And I said, at least I came to the conclusion, Kelly, agree or disagree, but I think it's as much about a mindset. And he talks on page 12, very quick in the book. He said, a company built for resilience is a company that is structured to last forever. And he uses that term all the time. Kelly referenced that a couple of minutes ago. So think about that for a minute, forever. That's a really, really long time. So This is different from a company built for stability, which is a very definition is about remaining the same. And obviously this isn't a book about remaining the same. And then he goes on in page 88, he said the responsibility of business is to use its will and resources to advance a cause. And he uses the term just cause quite a bit, greater than itself. He said protect the people and places in which it operates and generate more resources so that it can continue doing all those things for as long as possible, aka to keep playing. An organization can do whatever it likes to build its business so long as it's responsible for consequences of its actions. And the infinite game is a noun. I actually got stuck on that. Is it a noun, a verb, or an adjective? And then I looked up mindset. Mindset's actually a noun as well. But in the way I kept thinking of the book, the infinite game is as much about how you approach life, how you approach business, and it being a mindset actually more than a thing.
Yeah, for sure. And it's he talks on page 9 about the true value of an organization is measured by the the desire others have to contribute to that organization's ability to keep succeeding. So not just during the time that they're there, but beyond. And I have worked with organizations where the leaders are only focused so short term that they don't even want to talk about, the 20-year vision or 5-year vision. I literally had a potential client that I met with several years ago, and he had no interest in developing the other leaders because he wasn't going to be there. He was only here for a temporary assignment, and he'd be moving on to a different assignment. So he didn't really care what happened. Literally told me
in a period of stability, Kelly, or were they in a period of a crisis mode?
They were in stability at the time, but they did go through crisis after. So I didn't end up working with them. But
I can understand buttoning down the hatches in a period of crisis or disruption. Mm-hmm. But when you're in normal operating mode, if we can use that term, thinking in an infinite mindset certainly has value.
And so for a leader to think, well, he was here for like a 2-year stint to get experience in this certain area. And so he didn't really care about what happened to it after he was gone. And some leaders will say, I've worked with others that were going to retire and they just wanted to coast to retirement, and they didn't really care that much what happened after, so that's not the infinite game.
We've probably all seen that, unfortunately, and I think when
Yes.
somebody adopts that type of a mindset,
Mhm.
they probably would it would be a blessing for the company for them to go a little sooner rather than later.
Yeah. And you know, when people start talking like that, that is not a good thing. That is hashtag dinosaurs are there.
So he cites numerous business, I call them use cases and studies, and compare and contrast that to maybe somebody who does surveys for research. I'm with Kelly. He did a tremendous job of putting this book together, and can't help but be a fan. But so he compares and contrasts a finite mindset with that of an infinite mindset. And as we expect, it almost starts at the top and allows me to point out that every one of us is at the top of something. And I use this term all the time because we like to think, hey, I'm not the CEO. This doesn't apply to me. Au contraire, it really applies to you. We're all the top of something, whether it's a club, whether it's a friend group, whether it's your immediate family, maybe it's your extended family. But no, just because CEO isn't in your title yet, keyword being yet, right? You're still very much a leader. So case in point, the Container Store was a use case that he had.
Loved
And
it.
up and coming, I really did too. Up and coming brand, and they always said, "Hey, we are an employee first company." The 2008 recession hit, and if you guys lived through that, tough times across the board for just about any company, whether they were thriving or surviving. And they recognized that staying pat wasn't going to be an option. They had to do something, and leadership put together a plan of wage freezes, 401, discontinuing the 401k match, and they presented that to the employees. And the employee said, "You know what? We can do more. We can do even better than that." And so what they did is they limited travel. They had great case studies, employee testimonials of people that stayed with family when they traveled. They even had examples where employees went so far as to not even turn in their expenses and basically paid for the expenses out of their own pocket during this time. So again, you think about that. Is that demonstrating? Is that exemplifying and living an infinite mindset? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So, and whether that started at the top, whether it started with the employees, it's probably some combination of all of that. We don't talk in this book a lot about culture, but you can certainly kind of see where culture's woven throughout that use case. I was very impressed by that.
Yeah, me too. That was one of the ones I highlighted as well, versus some of the other ones where, which one was it that had everybody had the same financial compensation plan, not the same dollars necessarily, but everybody got bonuses at the end. Then as they grew, they changed it. So only the top level got the bonuses and everybody else was out. They didn't get them anymore. And so that's the opposite of what the Container Store inspired in its people. So if your employees feel like they're treated as less than, that they're taken advantage of so the leaders can get bonuses, that people don't care about them. They are not going to stay at their friend's house or their family's house on business trips. They're going to take every penny that they can out of that business trip.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the feedback we always get from our listeners is, hey, we want to hear how the book applies to you. And as I'm reading, the context for this month's podcast, I kept thinking of that. My business, as you guys know, supplies products to regional and national chains and restaurants. And we have various pricing models. Some are guaranteed. Some of them have a lot of risk, for us as a supplier. Some of them have no risk. But, we do all we can to weave what I call risk mitigation factors into the contracts. But at the end of the day, there are just certain contracts that have risk. So in 2025, we had a contract that was valued a little over $8 million, big contract. And at the midway point of the year, the market wasn't performing quite like we'd like. And this contract sort of went south, if you want to use that term, where we were losing money and every PO that went out the door, a little more loss. And everybody's looking at the numbers and it's starting to affect overall profitability. And we're looking at each other going, well, you know what? We have the opportunity to cut and run, or we have the opportunity to see this through. And I had read The Infinite Game years ago, and I wasn't really making the connection between that particular business situation and The Infinite Game. But then as I reread it now for a second time, you could certainly see where had we taken the cut and run approach midway through the contract, obviously it would have put that operator in a very precarious situation, and they probably could have solved it at some level of cost or expense. I generally don't see these things go to litigation, but there would certainly be cause for that if the operator chose to follow through on it. But The good story is that the business adopted an infinite game mindset and a long-term view, and we weathered the storm, so to speak, rather uncomfortably through 2025. And I'm proud to report that we just closed on the 2026 contract and obviously changed the parameters of it a little bit. But you can't think of a use case that applies to the infinite mindset more so than this one. This is exactly the infinite mindset personified.
It is, and that's the exact thing he talks about, is the pressure of the pressure of leadership is why people do play the finite game and turn something, even if it has a just cause or a bigger purpose at the beginning. Well, now there's pressure to meet the numbers. So, we have to throw that good part aside and just do whatever it takes to meet the numbers and not worry about that relationship in the future. That's so short-term thinking. That's the pressure that a lot of leaders are under today.
Good way to think of it. Yeah. So yeah. He talks a little bit about the motivation to play the game. And that's literally the term that Sinek uses. I want to play the game. I need to do everything I can to continue playing the game. And Kelly pointed it out in the opening. The goal isn't to win the way you would have with a basketball game or a football game or maybe around a golf, but the goal is just simply to play the game. So if you think about it, it's advancing something bigger than ourselves or an organization. He refers to it as a just cause. And you can kind of say just cause is a vision statement. It's something the same thing. But I regularly engage with colleagues, and it was funny that you brought up the people that you interacted with that were at least in the twilight of their career on the verge of retirement. And I regularly have colleagues that are close to my age, that maybe their positions have been eliminated or companies closed or whatever. And they know that, hey, they've got something left to give. They've got something left to offer, and they just want to continue, again, playing the game. So when my core, and I was thinking of how this related, and you get these little light bulbs that come on as you're reading the text, right? When my corporate position was eliminated in 2021, my mindset was certainly that. Now, I'm not advocating that I'm some exemplary person with an infinite mindset, but as I look back on how I approached that opportunity, it was definitely through that infinite mindset lens. So I kept asking myself, what's it going to take to keep playing the game, no matter what the form? I just wanted to find a way to contribute, to be involved, to be engaged, and be of value, whether it was to my downstream customers or whether it was to an employer, or maybe it was even to a pro bono, but it was just that need to feel valued. And I kind of put a bow on that thought of saying, hey, retirement looks good on a lot of people, and there are others maybe not so much. I'm still at that stage in life where I'm not quite ready to call it a game, so to speak. And that's some of the statements he makes in the book about, hey, you will come to a point when you can no longer play the game, i.e. it's time to exit stage right and probably do something a little less taxing, i.e. retirement.
And playing the wrong game is something that he talks a lot about. So knowing what game you're in, how do you even know, and how do you pay attention? And he talked about what are the leaders around you talking about, if they're only talking about the numbers or how we beat the competition, and they're not talking about the bigger purpose and the just cause. And he did clarify that the purpose or the vision is where you're going, and the just cause is beyond that winning. It's let's see. The just cause has to be affirmative, optimistic, inclusive, service-oriented, able to endure change, resilient, and then idealistic. But then he gives what it's not too. It's not just the moonshot, because that has an end time, so it's got to be bigger than that.
Yeah, when they talked about the moonshot section, I kept going back to sports analogies, and it's interesting. I'm a natural born people watcher. I don't know if that resonates with our listeners or not. I just enjoy watching people's behaviors, and it's always interesting to me, being a Kansas City guy watching the Chiefs. And if the Chiefs win, everybody's attitude on Monday in the office is on top of the world, right? We won, and it's as if they thought they played the game. And if we lose, everybody comes in Monday and their dollars are down, and they've got a sad face, and it's as if they played a game and they lost. And I say to myself, you didn't play the game, you didn't win or lose, someone else did. And it's this idea that somehow that game, the outcome of that game, impacted who and what they are. And I try to reiterate to people, your life didn't change from Friday to Monday based on the outcome of some random professional sports team. I'm sure there's a lot of our fans that are pretty passionate about their local sports teams and argue with me, but I've made that observation so many times.
Yeah. and I'm drinking out of a cheap Super Bowl cup from a glass from a few years ago.
Exactly. So
yeah, that identity though is key. And if the employee and the other stakeholders he talks about too, the customers, the suppliers, they got on board with the Container Store. He talked about the suppliers came forward and some other examples where that happened as well. And so that feeling that you create, that you inspire people to want to participate in a bigger way than just checking boxes.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
I had just a couple, these are random observations that I took away. And some of them will resonate, some of them won't. But I was growing up, when I was young in my career, I was a huge fan of Jack Welch. And for those of you who are familiar with Jack Welch, you know, he kind of had the same aura in his day of what we associate with Warren Buffett today. I mean, he was on all the talk shows, all the business channels. I mean, you couldn't literally turn one on and he wasn't on there. He authored a book, which was a national bestseller for a long time, called Straight from the Gut. And he had a very prescriptive way of managing GE, which at the time was a very, very big international conglomerate. It's not quite what it was at that point. It was interesting to me how I wasn't impressed initially, but I kind of observed he wasn't afraid to pull any punches. I mean, there were some people that he took to task for their management styles and what they did, how they managed their companies. I mean, it wasn't rose-colored glasses. He was pretty direct about that. My whole point was with the Jack Welch comment was, you know, history will often be the judge. And if you went back to the late 80s and early 90s and asked, you know, 5 business school students about Jack Welch, I'm sure you would have heard a much, much different story of what they thought of him versus what you'd have today. So that was one. Another go ahead, Kelly.
Yeah, I've seen that specifically about him because I never liked him. And he wrote a book called Winning. So that's Finite Mindset. But in that book, he described his philosophy and practice of firing the bottom 10% of the annual performance review. That's a lot of people in a company at GE size at the time. I just thought that was so anti-empathetic and short-term thinking and just so selfish. And I just hated that the whole time. But back then, when I used to talk about that as a speaker and doing like leadership development things, I swear it was almost like people were throwing tomatoes at me. Like that was, I was some oddball for thinking he wasn't the god of management.
And Fortune 500 companies were managed and led by disciples of Jack Welch.
They were.
I mean, back in the day, I mean, he literally was the pinnacle of management training and management leadership. And GE had internal training programs and disciplines. And I mean, it was incredible. So anyway, one kind of a silly observation. The other one, I had 2 others here.
If you got into the GE management training program out of grad school, that was like the most prestigious thing back then. But no, I had no interest in that whatsoever. But he does share a lot of names of leaders and the decisions they made. And he pulls those punches, like you said. Okay, what was your other example? I interrupted you.
That's okay. So Sinek wrote about, he called it the CEO, and then he even went on to say the CVO, Chief Visionary Officer, and how the CEO or CVO and then the COO and CFO work together, and how you need both roles in a company. I thought that the parallel to that was, if you've read Gino Wickman's Traction series, in there he uses what he calls the visionary and integrator roles, very similar to what Sinek uses for CEO and COO. And it's always interesting when you hear the same point illustrated and then validated from multiple sources, whether they stole it from one another or copied, plagiarized, I'll leave that for you to decide. But it just brings additional credibility. And I thought that was very interesting because I'm a big fan of Gino Wickman as well.
And another book that is similar to this was 2 years ago, we did The Long Game by Dory Clark.
Yep.
And hers was more on career than leadership of a business, but the philosophy was the same thing, and focusing on the long game, not making short-term decisions.
Exactly.
And then we did the Alan Mulally book a couple of years ago too. Mm-hmm. He talked a lot about him and the challenges he faced and the terrible leaders before and after him, and he names them all.
So I had one other kind of, and this is a Brett thing. In the book, he talks about Adam Smith's invisible hand. And for those of you who have studied economics, you're probably familiar with that concept. The point I make is that the week before, I had just referenced that Adam Smith's invisible hand in a business conversation. And my coaching to everybody is you just can't be too well read. And I think it was interesting to be able to see that in Sinek's book. And then I chuckled and smirked to myself, having just referred to that the week before. But, we're a product of our education and how we invest in ourselves. There's a term, and you've all heard it, called the imposter syndrome. And the way you overcome that, obviously, is you've got to continue to invest and expand and continuing education, all of those things. But I kind of got a chuckle at it when I read Adam Smith's Invisible Hand, given that I just referenced that the week before in a business context.
That's so good. I appreciate your point about continuing to grow, and that's how you get over that. And I don't like that term, imposter syndrome. I feel not to be all negative again about this, but I think calling it a syndrome, which is the term, calling it imposter syndrome makes it seem like it's this big, huge thing. When I coach a lot of people that will bring it up, but their confidence goes down because they're new to the C-suite. Or they moved and took a job in another city at the senior level. And so they're getting acclimated in a new city with a whole new team and at that level, or they've had another big change. Like there's reasons that your confidence would go down, and that's okay. That doesn't mean there's something wrong with you and that you have a syndrome.
Right.
Yeah.
So think of the infinite-minded leader who says, this is what we do. And it can be anything. We make this, we do this, we provide the service. And then think of that leader failing to adopt until the day there is no longer a market for what they're doing, right? In other words, there's been disruption in the industry and what they do is no longer of value. And it all begs the visionary to continually be reinventing their value proposition. So Sinek frames this as, if you don't blow it up, someone else will, which I thought was very, very interesting. So our business is providing goods and services to restaurants. And you wouldn't expect this to be an industry that's really ripe for disruption or change, but quite the contrary, it really is. So technology, and technology is so often the disruptor, is quickly emerging, which amalgamates both buy-side and sell-side data, which then allows restaurant operators, mostly the independents or the smaller restaurants, to optimize both sides of the buy-sell transaction. They buy their product better, but then they also have menu engineering to ensure that they're getting full value for their product. And there's a lot of different ways that happens. So I'm not ready to yield sourcing, which is a lot of what I do, to technology, but as it advances, it begs the question of, what will the business model look like over the next 5 to 10 years? And how do we plan for the next business cycle, i.e. the visionary, right? So, technology is really shrinking the world. That's kind of the way I look at it, because it's making information so readily available, information that wasn't available, not too long ago. And if you look at the case of Eastman Kodak, the decision to suppress the digital camera technology, was really significant in terms of disrupting their business, ultimately almost put them out of business. They're a fraction of the business that they were. And then think of all the industries, and typically entrepreneurs, I think of Elon Musk all the time, right? Why does he go into the automotive business or the automotive industry? Because there's a lot of money there, right? It's one thing to disrupt a big industry like automotive or defense or transportation technology, banking, real estate. Those are the big ones, right? Versus disrupting something that's pretty small. There's material value there, and then that infinite-minded visionary, they're rewarded. If you think of Walt Disney, and this is kind of where this all goes. So Walt Disney made the comment, he said, we will never stop in building. We will never stop inventing, and we will continue to build forever. And he said that the fear of staying the course may even lead to the eventual demise of your organization. So think about, as a leader, right, reinventing yourself, having that visionary, and knowing that you're doing that so that you can continue to play the game, perpetuate the game, but you're staying in the game forever, if you think of it that way.
Yeah. And that's a good reason to talk again about the just cause versus the purpose. Yep. So with Walt Disney, the purpose wasn't to create film, to create movies. It was I forgot how he worded it, but it's a
place where you leave today and enter the world of yesterday and tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then he went on to say, Disneyland will never be finished. It's something we can keep developing.
And before that, before he had Disneyland, and he still had that same philosophy, that was his just cause for the movies.
Yep.
And then when the others in the film industry, the film organization, weren't as aligned, and it was getting stifling, and he realized there are other ways I can fulfill this purpose. And so he left the film side and then created Disneyland. And that's such a great example of his purpose. His just cause was bigger than what his job was. Or, in your organization, it could be, or like a CVS? Is CVS selling makeup and prescriptions? There's something supporting people's health. So then they realized that they also sold a lot of tobacco products. So then they stopped doing that because those were not contributing to health. And so they got a lot of blowback for a short time. And then their stock was way over, everything went way up, their earnings per share, everything was way like double or triple, I think, within 3 years. So it's focusing on that bigger, not just the thing that could get disrupted. You know, in your business with the supplying protein, people could decide, like when being a vegan could become, you know, like the way, and then, but your company can figure it out, that you don't only have one idea. You know, you can figure out what else you can do to help people have nutrition in their homes.
Absolutely. So business school curriculums are kind of filled with case studies: Sears, Kmart, Circuit City, Blockbuster, Lehman, BlackBerry. There's just all kinds of business cases of companies that failed. And then obviously, you know, there's others that have went on to have great success. And, you know, Tesla and NVIDIA are the ones that obviously are getting the hot press right now. So why these companies fail, I said, is out of scope for this conversation. It's a big topic, but I would encourage everybody to get familiar with those as a baseline, and then obviously also study those that have succeeded. This book is filled with all kinds of great quotes, and I could spend literally the whole half an hour just talking. When I catch a really good quote, and I actually have one on my wall from the disconnect principle, but the one that I grabbed out of Sinek's book, and I hope it really resonates with everybody else, and this is a quote: "Trust, leaders are not responsible for the results. Leaders are responsible for the people who are responsible for those results." I just, that one really stuck with me, and I will probably use that often and forever. But I thought that was just a tremendous quote, and I think that's attributed to Sinek. I don't think he took credit or quoted anybody else. That was one that he actually made himself.
Yeah, I actually was sitting here, had that page open.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and there was another quote he had from Henry Ford that I wrote down. That it was a different one than one that I was 75 that I was familiar with, or maybe I'd heard it before. But
so I'm that guy who reads the inside book jacket, the foreword, the afterword. I read all of those, and when, especially when I get a good book, and this was a good one. So he closes, and it's a quote: "Our lives are finite, but life is infinite." And hear that again: life is infinite. We are finite players in the infinite game of life. We come and go. We're born and we die, and life still continues with or without us. And then he continues on: "In the game of life, the goal is not to win, it is to perpetuate the game, to live a life of service. None of us wants the final balance of our checkbooks on our tombstones. We want to be remembered for what we did for others. Devoted mother, loving father, loyal friend. To serve is good for the game." And then he closes with this last statement: "We only get one choice in the infinite game of life. What will you choose?" Mm-hmm. So let that sink in for a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yes.
we close, you know, we talked about before about every book, about whether or not, and we've said it, they're not all ringers, right? We've read some, let's call them duds, I guess is the best way to say it, but we certainly have. This one, I'm telling you, I did go back and look at my reading list because I knew I'd read this one before. I did not have it in my top 25. I'm going to have to rethink that. But this is one of those, a little bit like Covey's 7 Habits, where you want to dust this one off maybe every other year. You know, January around New Year's is always time to blow through a book pretty quickly. But I've read 7 Habits, I think 3 or 4 times. Now I've read this one twice. So I'm probably going to have to rethink my reading list. I made a comment to myself that I will commit to the team that I will review my reading list, and then Kelly will republish it on the website.
Yeah, and I would put it in mine as well. And I teach in the Rockhurst MBA grad school program. I teach corporate social responsibility. And I think I'm going to have this be the textbook with the class that starts in March.
Oh, good for you.
It's one for, I don't focus on teaching them what to think, but how to think. And I think that's exactly what this is. So I think every leader on their way up, every leader that wants to stay relevant would benefit from this book for so many different reasons. Yeah, so I recommend it as well. I'm excited to share it more.
So this is our last convo of 2025. Yeah. High five. You know, we're at the end of the year. So thank you, Kelly, for another great year, and specifically motivating me, this guy, to continue investing in myself. You're an inspiration to both me and all of our listeners, and I'm so forever grateful and looking forward to what lies ahead in 2026. And yeah, for the listeners, if you were wondering, we're in for 2026. Come along for the ride. So thank you all for investing your time in us, and I'm confident that following a similar script as ours will yield incredible results. although we didn't cover it in this conversation, networking is right there with continuous learning and personal development. So adopt those 2 habits and you simply can't go wrong. So happy holidays to all of our listeners. And with that, Kelly, I'll let you take us out.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Brett. Thanks for joining me this year on this journey. And thank you, everybody who's joined along the way as well. Oh, I forgot to check to see if anybody was here live. Oh my gosh, sorry if I missed you and you were here live. I didn't check the comments or anything on LinkedIn that I usually do. So I apologize, but I'll look at the comments later. You can go to voyagecg.com/leadership books for more information about what's coming up. And there also is a reflection for you to use after watching this broadcast and or if you read the book. But I think it can come in handy even if you don't read the book. So grab that reflection. You don't even have to provide your email address. You just click the download there and you'll be able to grab it. So I hope you enjoy that and get something out of it. And our book in January will be Mindfully Successful. And this is from Margot Boster, and it's Unlock the Power of Your Brain, Body, and Breath to Elevate Your Leadership. So I think this is a good foundational one to start the new year, connecting the mindset from today, but the brain, body, and breath. So we will look forward to talking about that one in a month or so. And then more great ones coming up. I'm excited for February's too. And more coming up. And I did reach out. I'm reaching out to the authors this year or in 26 to see if more of them will join us. So good, fun things ahead. So stay tuned. Thank you for joining us this year. And we'll look forward to more development and growth for all of the leaders in the future. So thank you so much, everybody. Take care. Best wishes for the end of your year.